So we're here at the shop, Oldsmobile 455, and we drove this thing all the way back from California to Wisconsin, listening to clunking going on all the time, which was, made the ride not that pleasant. When we get home, put it up on the lift, you could see it could have been easily fixed by just cutting the exhaust, move it over a little so the drive shaft wouldn't hit the muffler, and then the sway bar tie links to the chassis, you could go clunk, 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 clunk. We thought that, the noises that you hear sometimes under a car make it sound like it's going to fall apart, but he'd been through this before, and sometimes just a small, like a shock absorber not being tight can make noises rattle through a car that'll scare you. But we're going to fix that today, and the ride would have been way more pleasant if we wouldn't have had to listen to that all the way back. So what you can see is, if you look at this, the drive shaft is on the side, the drive shaft's in the middle and the exhaust is on the driver's side in the right location. Well, this one is actually underneath the drive shaft. It needs to be over. So this guy made this bend here and then this bend too long. You gotta take up some space, cut it, shorten it, because this is right. As this spins, it hits the muffler right there. So all the way home, we were listening, you'd think it would have worn a spot through the muffler, but it didn't. So Flowmasters are pretty tough. Right there is where it hits. Clunk. We were listening to that the whole way. This link and this link, you could move them up and down. Well, you can't work on a Trans Am on the ground, at some gas station, but everything was loose. So you'd come into a driveway and you clunk, clunk, you thought the rear end was going to come out of the car, but actually this has new leaf springs, all new pads in here, new rubber in here, new gas tank. Pretty nice underneath here. There's no dented up. A lot of times when my buddies had Camaros and Firebirds, they went through ditches, and a lot of stuff got leveled off underneath. This thing's been around for a long time. None of this is damaged. It probably got a babied life. So somebody probably forgot about this, and put it on. They didn't put it under, it's supposed to be going straight across here. So that's another rattling noise. All these things add up. And the car's like a bell. It just, when you're going 100 miles an hour, we were hearing all kinds of stuff going on. When we left California, like I said, it was just barren wasteland. And I'm riding right along with everybody else. And I go, man, the first thing we got to do when we get back to Wisconsin is we got to calibrate the speedometer. And you go, well, the speed limit's 75. It says we're doing 110. And we stayed 110 all the way to Amarillo, Texas until there was road construction going on. It says your speed, and I look and it says we were supposed to be going 50 miles an hour in a construction site, but I slowed down. I thought the speedometer was off, but there was no car in front of me, and all of a sudden it says your speed is, and it was 63 miles an hour, and I looked down at the dash and it was 63 miles an hour, and I go, we've been driving 110 miles an hour ever since we left California. So the thing's really a good touring car, really. It's just probably about, I think it was 2,500, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a 256 gear in the rear end. It's not the original gear in there, so we're gonna change that when we get to it.
A lot of times when you end up doing something and you think, oh, I want to move this over a little bit, and I'm going to take 3/4 of an inch out of it here, but this is already at an angle, and you move it over that far, you're going to be pulling this back, you can end up doing a whole bunch of things. This is something we're going to have to sneak up on. If you took too much off, you'd be pulling the whole thing forward, to get it back to being connected, and it'll get it over, but, the back end of the pipes are going to be a different length, you know what I mean? So You only want to take off as much as we have to, just get this pipe closer to this thing here and get it away from the drive shaft. If you ever have to do exhaust, and believe me, this isn't, you know, the best thing in the world, but you know, it's just a bunch of little pipe cutters, and you're gonna fit it around, hook it in here at the right width, you know, and then you're squeezing it, and you're actually deforming the metal. You're splitting it apart, and it doesn't work all that great. You know, it's the side that has the most driving force is going to be cutting in first, but you got to keep rocking around. Once you get that done, it's a lot better than having a sawzall going, the whole pipe rattling around, the blade getting bound up. There's all different ways. Other guys just take a cutting torch and start over. So it actually self-centers, and you know you're getting a straight cut rather than when you use a sawzall, you know, the blade starts to take curves and stuff. What happens is, if you cut on a curve or anything, it's not even a round, you know, it's been distorted. So you always try to do it in your flat areas, and then when it comes back together, it's going to be easier to weld together. The two pieces are the same size. And if you cut it straight, then the next time you put it together, the two pieces will fit together and not be touching on one spot and a big gap in the back. This had a nut on there, and then there's another one. I think all you'd have to do is use a lock washer.
This is what happens when you take your car to like a muffler shop, and then they just rig up some crap and start drilling holes in the car instead of using the factory brackets. But it's here, so we're just going to leave it for the time being. The factory hanger is still on it here. And actually back here it's missing the factory hanger, so we'll get one of those.
So we don't go cutting at a goofy angle. I told them to mark it, and then we put tape around there. When you pull tape tight, it'll be straight. Or if you take a radiator clamp and you put it down around here, as you're cutting, you can't go into the radiator clamp because it's stainless steel, it doesn't want to cut. And it'll make sure that you don't have, you know, something going offline. And when we put these back together, I could show you this on here. You'll see that this is way clearance now, and it's away from here. It's not going to be banging. And then this is going to be here. And you can see where we're going to piece it back together. In theory, it should work, but things don't always turn out the way you want. But it'll get us at least away from conking our drive shaft. This is not the way you would want to cut a tube. Hopefully it works out. You even got a bent blade. I tried straightening it. It's a lot easier than a hacksaw. This is all baked on oil from the rear main seal, this battery, and you know, you put on 1,000 miles, and that little drip going on coated this, and if we were welding it, we're going to smell that as this heats up. You guys can get by with just handheld wire wheels and that, but if you can ever get a pedestal like this, it really makes your life easy, because now instead of hanging on to something, you can do things with two hands while you're cleaning something up like this, instead of on your knees going, eh. All right, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is not the way to go. When you do plumbing or with exhaust, you always go over the top. So you can see this guy shoved the pipe in, as air's going like that, it's not great for flow. You always want to have this one over the top. He expanded that and went in. Wrong way. That's a big weld there.
So it's clearance real good on the drive shaft now. But we've got this situation. So we have to try to slide that pipe about a 1/4 inch forward to make it mate.
You can see how this is getting banged by this.
It was getting hit on a downstroke and on the upstroke. I think when you hit a bump and the suspension will go through its travel.
Well done. Okay.
And we're gonna redo this exhaust, all factory brackets. This is just a temporary fix. We'll get rid of all this crap that somebody put on here.
And then we'll paint the whole bottom.
Right, with the original red that they used.
Look at this. Like they must have been using an arc welder. Jesus, this is really crude. What is this? Is that supposed to be there?
I don't think so. I believe this here was the bracket that's supposed to go to the factory bracket. And he just chopped it off. This pipe's actually wobbling back there.
What ended up happening is when we separated, you know, the old gasket was so dry and brittle, we had to chisel it off. And luckily we found some old gaskets. These are just like hard, fireproof paper, I don't know. But we're using this copper, ultra copper for high temp. And you just smear this on, and this will take care of any voids. And put it on both sides, and then you don't have that little pss, 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 pss. That's a real annoying, you know, you come to show off your car and everybody's looking at a nice car and it's going pss, 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 pss.
We ended up having to offset that bracket there a little bit. You can see there's plenty of clearance now on that muffler. The driver's side still has a little bit more, but this is really temporary exhaust in this car anyway.
I can even stick my fingers in between here now. And the drive shaft ain't gonna hit here. And it's not hitting the body. And the exhaust tailpipe doesn't hit the back, you know, panel on the... This used to be banging around on here, but now we got that tight and it's a little resting on it. And it's the way it's supposed to be. If you ever need to do anything, you don't have the stupid emergency brake cable keeping you from dropping the exhaust. So as we were driving back from California, you get to knowing every little thing going on with the car. And I says, man, it sounded like somebody dropped a wrench in between the fender and the inner fender well. Because you'd hear a clunk every once in a while when this wheel hit a bump. And upon further inspection, when we got it back, there's a charcoal canister for the emission controls, and it vents your fuel tank into these fumes going to the charcoal, and then it gets sucked into the carburetor. But the band that held this charcoal canister was banging around down there, and I thought, oh, simple fix, get the band up, find a screw that would fit. It was like a coarse thread. So then I thought, oh, just put it on, tighten it up. You wouldn't have believed what it was like with this thing in the way. And I get the band around, I get it lined up, and I held it with a screwdriver, and then my partner here had his ratchet with a flexi joint, and then trying to get that thing started. It was a two-man job just to put this little band on there. But now you'll see this charcoal canister, it doesn't move at all. But it's really not on the pan squared up. I was searching for a thing on the bottom that it must index on, but it ain't gonna rattle around. This is all gonna be coming apart. When the engine comes out, we'll re-gasket it, put a new rear main seal in it, and clean this all up inside here. Then we'll have this all apart. All these parts are gonna get painted. Whenever you're doing any kind of voltage testing anywhere, you should go right to the battery first and see what you're starting out with. And you'll see that the battery is 12 volts, 12, 20. And then we got the key on and a fan comes on, but the voltage going to the electronic ignition should be a full 12 volts. And when he plugs in there, we're getting 1166. So there's some kind of resistance in there. And we haven't even checked it while you're cranking. That might change too. Some of these things had points in them. They'd have ballast resistor, inline resistor. So when you let off, you know, you got a hot shot while you were cranking, and when you let off, the voltage drops so you didn't burn out points. But we want a full 12. Underneath the hood, we're going to want to do a lot of cleaning up. And we got vacuum lines going all over the place. You got a cluster back here. And then there's EGR fittings, and it's been so long, you know, I don't know where all this goes, in a little can. So there's a back port where you get the most vacuum underneath the throttle blades. You've got one hose looping around, and there's a long section of rubber hose going to the vacuum modulator. If we end up bending that up right, you should try to have the shortest amount of, you know, just like an inch of rubber where it go in one way and then be straight going to the other. I was getting oil on it, it was all ballooned out. But this is where his vacuum is coming for the transmission, and that's a ported vacuum. You want it down at the base. Anytime you're hooking up your vacuum modulator on an old car, you'd want strong vacuum signal to it. Nowadays, everything's just done electronically, but this is how it worked with centrifugal weights on the governor and a vacuum modulator, controlling your shifting of the automatic transmission. Yeah, thanks for watching Oldsmobile 455. You'll see that in the process of just slowly but surely eliminating problems that the other guy just let go, you bring the value of the car up to the point where if he ever needed cash and he was selling it, somebody would be underneath looking at it, and everything should be perfect, and then you get top dollar. You're gonna put all new, you know, body bushings in it and everything, and paint everything under there, and decent exhaust system, and clean up the engine bay. It'll be top notch.